No funny business.
What? What? Yeah, pretty standard.
Hey Fatske, no, I wouldn't say so. Usually see how the cop is sliding towards you. Oh yeah, just like that, just like that. Hello everyone, my name is Waffle and welcome to the 18th episode of Strats Explained, Magically Easy, a video series where I explain how and why different strats and glitches that speedrunners use work. As you might have guessed, today we are going to be talking about Ultra Cops, these superheroes who magically slide to your car or to your bike and try to arrest you. They were killing runs all the way back in 2013 and continue to do so today. No one is safe, even Definitive Edition players.
Okay, uncat might not be the best idea. What? What the what?
When this topic was suggested, I got scared. This is another mystery. Nobody knows why it is happening and has been happening for more than 10 years now. And also, there is no reliable way of reproducing this bug. Luckily, Nick007J told me that speedrunners who used the old Van Heist thread were getting like one Ultra Cop in around 10 attempts. That didn't sound so bad and the method actually worked. Unfortunately, it wasn't as effective. But if you spent a couple of hours on trying, you would usually get like one Ultra Cop. However, when this topic won, two of my viewers, independently of each other, conducted their own research and shared their results. At some point it even felt like they would solve the whole mystery and I wouldn't need to do anything, but unfortunately that didn't happen. I had to work myself. But thank you so much for this information. Without you, this video would probably have come out much later. Let's get started. The first comment says that we can get the Ultra Cop effect if we call setCarJack. So let's open this function, there it is, and let's put a breakpoint somewhere. If you don't know what a breakpoint is and what it does, keep watching, I'll show you in a minute. Another super useful comment. Spitfire says that he found the 100% consistent way of triggering an Ultra Cop. You have to get on a bike with popped tires and have a vehicle between you and the cop. I also enabled the pet debug cheat from RE City that shows some useful information about pedestrians. Later we will use the current state and current objective. The game stopped and that means that we hit our breakpoint. Now we can find where this function was called from. And let's take a look at the call stack window. It says that the function was called from ccoped process control. Let's double click this line and there it is, the function call we were looking for. The very first thing I see is that this function call is surrounded by different conditions, a lot of them, and all of them had to be true in order to call this function. So we have to look through all of them to understand what is going on in the game. We'll start with the innermost one. We get if, else if statement, and it works the following way. If the first condition is true, then the game will execute this line and it's not going to check anything further. But if the first condition is false, it's going to check the second condition. If the second condition is true, it's going to execute this line and nothing else, and so on. We know that this line was executed, and that means that the first and the second conditions had to be false, but the third one had to be true. Let's look at all of that. The first part says that player's vehicle must exist, and we are currently on a bike, so it definitely exists, nothing wrong here. Next part says that pedestrians have to be able to enter our car, but what does it mean? Let's open this function to find our answer. Pedestrians can enter vehicles if that's a bike, and this is our case. However, pedestrians cannot enter vehicles if we are in a car that's on its side or flipped. It has to be straight. And no matter what the type of our vehicle is, pedestrians cannot enter it if we're moving too fast. And I think this is why we had to pop our tires, so it wasn't required, but that made us go very slowly, so we weren't going too fast. Okay, what else do we have here? It also says that nobody else can be entering our vehicle at the same time as the Ultra Cop. And nobody was even close to us, so all of that checks out. Let's look at this condition that had to be false. And this one is a little bit weird. We take cop's position, we take his z value, meaning his height in the world, and we compare it to the height of something called vec_pos. And we don't really know what's that yet, so let's assume it's all checks out and skip it for now. We'll come back to that later. This condition also had to be false, and the first part says that player's vehicle must not exist. Notice this exclamation mark. And we know that our bike exists, so this is definitely false, and we don't really have to check the rest of the condition. Let's go one level above. It says that cop cannot be ducking and covering at the moment, and the function called seek has to return true. Once again, we don't know what that function does, and for now we are gonna skip it and assume that it definitely returned true in that moment. Let's go one layer higher again, and this time we have an if-else statement, and we are in the else branch, meaning that the condition had to be false, and that says that player's state cannot be arrested. And yeah, we are on the bike, we are not arrested yet, so checks out so far. Another level above. This time we're checking cop's state, and it has to be equal to seek_pos. What is seek_pos? Once again, we don't know it yet, but that's a huge clue. We have to check it out later to see what that seek_pos state means, what cops do when they're in that state, etc, etc. So let's remember that. Once again, another if-else, we are once again in the else branch, and it says that cop state cannot be idle or attack, and we know that since all of that was executed, his state was seek_pos, meaning it couldn't be anything else, so everything checks out. We can see that there is more code above, but as you can see, it's located at the same level. Indentation in C++ is not required, but any sane programmer uses it because it makes the code easier to read. So we don't really have to check anything else because these conditions don't really matter. Okay, I bet that was a lot of information, so let's quickly recap what we understood and what we have to find out later. First of all, we have to be in some sort of a vehicle and cops should be able to enter it. That means that we either have to be on a bike or in a car that is not flipped or on its side. It has to be straight. In any case, we cannot be moving fast, otherwise cops won't be able to enter our car. Also, nobody else must be entering at the same time. We also know that cops must be in state called seek_pos. We don't know what exactly that is yet, but we know that they have to be in this state. And we also know that some function called seek returned true, and there was some vec seek_pos we have to look at later, but as you can see it's called seek_pos, state is seek_pos, so that's probably related. I think that's enough information that we got from our first UltraCop. If we understood everything correctly, when I press the continue button, the UltraCop will happen, so the cop will slide to my bike, knock me off, and try to arrest me. Let's see if that happens. When we press, the game is paused, but we can resume it, and boom! I was right! We got busted. Let's check out the seek_pos state. To do so, we highlight it and press Shift plus F12. We're looking for a function called setPetState because that function changes states, and there's only one such call right here. We see that it is being called from a function called setSeek. It has a few parameters. The first one is a vector called pos, and the other one is a number called distance to count done. We basically change the state to seek_pos, and then we save distance to count done into a variable called distance to count seek done. And we also save pos into vec seek_pos, the variable we just saw earlier and didn't understand what it was. So now, judging by all of these names, I think it's fairly safe to assume that pos is actually a position. Basically a point somewhere on the map, and this function tells the pedestrian, you have to get to that point and you have to be at most distance to count done units away from it or even closer. And so far this makes sense because when cops are trying to arrest us, they're trying to get close to us. But let's confirm that theory, and to do so we once again are going to press Shift plus F12 and see where this function is called from. As you can see, there are multiple results and I checked all of them. The one that was the most interesting to me was this one. go to nearest door and we pass a vehicle into that function. Here we find the nearest door that a pedestrian can access and open. The game basically finds the coordinates near that door. And then the game says, go to that point, you have to get within 0.5 units. And this makes sense because cops are trying to get to our door to open it and bust us, or to get to our bike to knock us down and once again bust us. Let's continue and go one level higher. Once again, shift plus F12, and this time we only have two results. And they're very similar to each other. The first one is function called kill char on foot melee, and the second one is kill char on foot armed. I don't think I need to explain what they do. But let's look at the conditions around this function call. We have a few. The first one says that pedestrian's type has to be a cop, and this is exactly our case. The second one says that player's vehicle must exist, and we know it does. The next one says that pedestrian state, our cop state, cannot be ped attack. And also, he cannot be kinda staying in the same place. I'm not really sure what exactly that is, but he was moving, so I guess he wasn't staying in the same place. And we also, our player, cannot be in a no police zone. Okay, what else do we have here? Another condition, this time ped an objective, that's our player, and our player's state cannot be arrested. Okay, makes sense. Once again, cop's state cannot be carjack, so he cannot be stealing cars. And finally, player must be in a vehicle, and player's state cannot be drag from car, so we must be already sitting in the car and not just stealing it. So far so good, all of these conditions make sense and they should be true in our case. Let's see where this function is called from. Once again, shift plus F12, and this time we have only one result. Let's see what it is, and look, we found both of the functions, and well, the one that is gonna be called is decided by the result of this condition, which is basically checking what kind of weapon the pedestrian is using. And I'm saying pedestrian and not cop because this function is not specific to cops. It is used for all of the pedestrians. But the main part here is that we ended up in a function process objective. This is one of the most important functions because it controls pedestrians' behavior and is called every frame. The objective in question is kill char on foot, and I think this is our confirmation for the theory. When we attack a cop, his objective becomes kill char on foot. Then, depending on the situation, he will be using either his nightstick or his pistol, but that's not very important. What is that if we're in a vehicle, then this long chain of function calls that we just saw is going to be executed and his state will change to seek pause. Now we can go back to this condition and understand what it does. It is basically checking the cop's height relatively to our player's vehicle height. So if the cop is way higher than our car or way lower than this, then he cannot reach the door handle and open the door. And in that case, the game tells him to stand still. However, if the cop is relatively at the same height as we are, then he is going to try to bust us. And this is our case because remember when he was ultra-copying us, he was basically on the same road as we were. Now the last thing we need to find out is when does seek return true. To do so, we're gonna open this function and see a lot of code. But don't worry, the only thing we care about is this condition, and here's why. If this condition is true, then we execute everything that's inside and eventually we are going to hit return false. So when the condition up there is true, seek returns false. And the other way around works as well. When the condition up there is false, then we skip everything that's inside, execute everything that's after it, and eventually we return true. And that's the case we are curious about. So let's go back to the condition. It consists of two parts, the first one and the second one, and either of these has returned true for the whole condition to return true. But forget about the first condition, it is irrelevant, trust me, we are going to see that later. It's going to be false every single time here. So let's focus on the second condition. It says seek pause dist has to be greater or equal to distance to count it done. This value we already saw. Remember, distance to count seek done, the value that was set in the setSeek function, and I can show you that again. Here is setSeek and here's that value. In our case it is 0.5. But what is the other one? The other one is seek pause dist, and it is calculated right there. And this basically calculates the distance between the point the cop is trying to get to and his current position. And the distance is a 2D distance, meaning that it doesn't take height into account. So, this condition will be false when the cop reaches his destination. And that is very weird, because that means that the point he was trying to get to was far away from our player. Remember that after that Ultra Cop slid to us. Why is the point so far away? Is this really what is happening? I decided enough speculation, so I launched the game again and tried to get another Ultra Cop. This time I didn't pop the tires and was just driving slowly. The Ultra Cop also happened pretty quickly. I listed all of the variables we are interested in the watch window so we can see their values. And here's what we got. The cop's y-coordinate is very similar to the y-coordinate of the point he is traveling to, and it is very different from player's y-coordinate. The x-coordinate is relatively the same, but still not quite. So it's confirmed, the cop reached his destination, which was for some reason far away from us. And that's weird, because process objective is executed every frame, and that means that vec_seek_pos also has to be updated every frame, and the value should be coordinates of our door or our bike. And we can easily see that when we're just driving around the cop. He's constantly changing his direction depending on our position. My first thought was, what if vec_seek_pos is also changed by something else? Or what if setSeek is also called with some other coordinates from somewhere else? I went back to all of these results that we saw in the beginning of the video when we were pressing Shift plus F12, but I didn't find anything new. At some point I went back to the Ultra Cop clip and noticed something rather strange. Do you see it? The state is follow pass, not seek_pos. But in the code we saw that the state was indeed seek_pos, and that means that the state just changed from follow pass to seek_pos, and the game didn't have enough time to update it on the screen. But what is follow pass? To answer that question, we are gonna use this search. We already know that the function is called setPetState, and the argument is gonna be petFollowPass. Let's see how many results we get, and the answer is just 2. The first function is called setFollowPassDynamic, and the second one is called setFollowPassStatic. Quite similar. Okay, let's see where these are called from. Highlight the function name, Shift plus F12, and this time we have only one result. And there we can see both of these functions being called depending on the condition. Very similar to what we saw earlier with the armed/melee functions. But where are we? We are currently in setFollowPass. Okay, where is this function called from? Shift plus F12, multiple results this time. Let's look at the second one first. Here we get in a function called setDirection to walk around the vehicle. And remember, we had to drive around vehicles, and that means that cops had to run around vehicles too. So this all checks out. I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be, but I put a breakpoint right here, launch the game and confirm that this function is called when cops are getting around vehicles, so we are on the right track. But this is not the only place where setFollowPass is called from. The other one is right here, in function called followPass. This function is called every frame if the current state of a pedestrian is followPass. So it's going to be called until the cop finally gets around the vehicle he is trying to get around. And if we look closely, we will see that this function modifies vec_seek_pos, meaning that the coordinates change from coordinates of our player's vehicle door to coordinates of the vehicle the cop is trying to get around. And that again sounds correct, because every time Ultra Cops were happening, they were near cars. But wait a second, we know that after that the cop's state changes to seek_pos. We also know that there is only one function that can do so, and we know that we must pass coordinates into that function, and these coordinates are gonna be coordinates of our player's vehicle door. So why do these coordinates not change? The situation became even worse when I came back to that only function. Remember, it's called setSeek and it changes the state to seek_pos. I noticed this. If our current state is followPass, then we immediately return from this function and the state is not changed. So not only do we have only one function that is capable of changing the state to seek_pos, but we also cannot use it in this situation. What? For some time it felt like I reached a dead end, but then my experience of reading GTA code helped me. I remembered that there is another function that can change the state back to the previous one. You see, when a pedestrian changes his state from one to another, the game saves the state he's changing from. In our case, from seek pause. And if you later call restore previous state, and as you can see it's here everywhere in this function, then the game restores the state back to the saved one, right here. But look, it does not restore vec seek pos, the coordinates, the point the cop is trying to reach. So when this happens, the game still believes that the cop has to reach the point that is located at the car he was going around. And if it so happens that he already reached this point, if he is within 0.5 units, then this condition right here that we saw earlier returns false, and whole seek function returns true, and we get ultracopped even though the car the cop was getting around is located so far away from our player. And it's obvious that it doesn't happen every single time, otherwise we would get ultracopped every time a cop went around a vehicle. But it is also obvious that it does happen sometimes, and that's how ultracops are triggered, and we finally solved this mystery. Also, remember when I told you to ignore the first part of the condition? Well, you see, we get next node from seek following path, and it is obviously related to follow path that we just saw. But if we go all the way back here, we'll see that every time we restore the state, we also clear follow path. And this function removes all of the points, all of the nodes that were needed for the cop to go around the vehicle. And since we don't have any nodes anymore, the value is going to be empty, and that's why we could ignore it earlier. So now all we have to do is open GTA 3's code and confirm the same thing happens there. Or maybe it doesn't. You see, I found setFollowPath, one of the functions that we checked in GTA Vice City. Remember, that's the one where at the end we had the dynamic and static functions. Well, they're not here anymore. Moreover, this line says that if the current pedestrian is not a player, then we immediately return false. And that means that in GTA 3, only player is allowed to be in the follow path state, and nobody else. And that means that ultracops in GTA 3 are different, and we got yet another mystery on our hands. Now, I'm not gonna tell you how I debugged this all, because I was doing literally the same thing. I checked the code for the cops. It's very similar to the Vice City's code. The seek function, vecSeekPos, and the rest. Almost the same. So I put a bunch of breakpoints everywhere, launched the game, and tried to get an ultracop. It wasn't as easy as in GTA Vice City. As I mentioned before, I would usually have only one ultracop per evening. And that meant that I had to squeeze out as much information as possible, and unfortunately I wasn't really getting much. Yes, I saw that the cop reached his destination, and I also saw that the destination was far away from the player, but I just couldn't see why it was far away from the player. I went back to the old series. Maybe something calls the function with the wrong coordinates, or maybe something else changes the coordinates. Or maybe there is yet another state the cop changes to and then goes back to seekPos. But no, nothing. And then I remembered this comment. DDoS said that he managed to record an ultracop and it works the following way. Cop was running to the old player's position and then ultracop happened. And that made me think, what if the state stays seekPos, but the coordinates stop updating for some reason? Is that possible? Eventually, I ended up right here, and we already saw that in GTA Vice City. See? Go to nearest door. This is the function that tells the cop to go to the closest door, and this is the function that updates the coordinates. I decided to look at the conditions around. If you're curious, we are still in process objective. And you won't believe me if I tell you that the objective is still kill Charon Food. This code is very similar to what we saw in GTA Vice City. In GTA Vice City it was just decomposed into multiple functions, and here everything is in one place. But the code itself is very similar, so it doesn't really matter. I checked the conditions and I actually managed to find the wrong one. It's right here. Let's look at it. We are once again going to skip the first part, but we'll come back to it soon. The second part says the current cop's weapon cannot be a melee weapon, so he has to have his pistol out. The easiest way to achieve so is by getting 2 stars. And this is what was slowing down my testing a lot. Because in Van Heist, you initially get only 1 star when you damage the security car. You get the second one only when you almost fill the bar. After I learned this information, I tried starting Van Heist when I already had 2 stars, and I started getting a lot more Ultra Cops. But back to the condition. The next part says that the distance between our player and the cop has to be less than weapon's range. Weapon is a pistol, and while debugging I found out that the range is 30. But this same distance also has to be greater than 3, so the cop cannot be right in front of us. If all of that is true, we end up in this branch, and that means that we do not end up in the else branch, and we do not execute this code, including this function, and the coordinates do not update. But is that an issue? Let's see. In this branch, we draw an invisible line from the cop to our player, and if there is nothing between us, then the cop starts attacking us. He's shooting us for a random amount of time, from half a second to 2 seconds. And after he's done, he also gets a random cooldown. All of that contributes to the attack timer. So this first condition basically means that if the cop is already shooting, or just stopped shooting and is still in the cooldown, he cannot start shooting again. And while he's shooting and he's in the cooldown, we always get in this branch and we always update the coordinates. So even though we do not update the coordinates the moment the cop starts shooting us, that's only 1 frame, and we continue updating them right after. So this is not an issue, this is not what is causing the Ultra Cop. However, have you noticed the important condition? What if there is constantly something between us and the cop? Maybe another pedestrian, or an object, a vehicle, maybe a security car that we're trying to damage, And yes, it turns out, if the cooldown is already over, or the cop hasn't shot in the first place, and he is ready to start shooting us, but he can't because there is something that is obstructing his vision, he is not going to start attacking us. We will continue getting in this branch over and over again, but while there is something that blocks cop's vision, he won't start shooting us. But that also means that we will never end up in this branch. We will stop executing this function, stop updating the coordinates, and eventually the cop will reach the old ones. And that's when an Ultra Cop will happen, because the seek function will return true, just like as we saw in Vice City, and the rest is also going to be the same as we saw before. If you go back to GTA Vice City for a moment, then we'll see that this condition stayed unchanged. The only thing that's missing here is the part about not having a melee weapon, but that's only because it was moved further up. Remember, this function is only called when a pedestrian has a gun. The important thing here is that the cop will start attacking you no matter what, even if there is a wall between you and him. And that means that starting from the next frame, we will continue updating the coordinates and everything is gonna be fine. Turns out you cannot get a GTA 3 Ultra Cop in GTA Vice City, and you cannot get a GTA Vice City Ultra Cop in GTA 3. But that's only some words, can we actually prove them in the game? I felt like this place on Dam was perfect, so I took a slow car and started driving around, trying to get away from a cop while still not going way too fast. The result was immediate. I even got a stealth cop, or how people called him back in the day, a ninja cop. I tried to understand what happened to the cop who was running after me using the replay feature, but didn't see anything concrete. I guess it's time to sum it up. Ultra Cops happen because the coordinates a cop needs to reach become incorrect. In GTA 3 that happens because the coordinates stop updating if there is something between you and the cop. In GTA Vice City, coordinates temporarily change when a cop needs to go around the vehicle, but after he is done, they are not restored immediately. What other questions do we still have unanswered? Are there Ultra Cops in other GTAs? Yes, for example, in GTA Liberty City Stories you can sometimes see them during Dead Meat. Judging by this clip, looks like we're dealing with the Vice City Ultra Cop. But are there different Ultra Cops? I think so, at least I saw this one. It looks very similar, but he's chasing a criminal, not the player. Okay, but are there completely different Ultra Cops that we cannot explain using the knowledge we uncovered today? I still believe the answer is yes. I even feel like I saw some before, but they have to be quite rare. Looks like we still have tons of open questions. Why do Ninja Cops happen? Those who are interested can dig deeper, but I think that's gonna be enough for me. We already saw multiple conditions that prevent cops from arresting us. For example, we can go fast enough. But as you can see, we can also stay still. Just need to aim left or right, but you need to have a weapon. It works in GTA 3 and other games, and it works because of this little piece of code. But oh no, there is a bug! Find it and leave a comment. This is your challenge for today. The last time I said that we're going to take a break from difficult topics, but you voted for this? Let's try again. A poll for the next topic is already available on the community tab. Click the link from the pinned comment and choose the topic you like the most. Now before I go, I'm going to ask you for one thing. If you watch this video all the way up to this point, please let me somehow know in the comments. Making these videos in English takes a lot of time and effort, and I'm questioning myself if it's worth it because I barely see any feedback. I just don't know how many people care about this series. I'm considering different options, but for now I won't ask you for this favor. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and if you don't want to miss the next episode, consider subscribing. My name is Waffle, see you the next time.